When you don't feel like you deserve love because of your relationship with your parents, you'll sabotage relationships that could potentially be beautiful. Usually people's adaptations is can't hold down relationships, suicidal with themselves, bad relationship with their kids, careers that they hate. There's usually a common thread that is created as a result of the trauma. There's actually three types of people in the world. There's the narcissist, there's a covert narcissist, and then there's a wounded empath. But my two sisters then in the 90s became addicted to heroin through their own traumas. It was a very grim household, but a lot of physical violence. Like, he would have projected a lot of his anger and his wounds onto me. I wouldn't have known this at the time, but he would have hit me to the point where I would have actually urinated myself with fear as a kid. Literally trying to be a man, but still emotionally trapped as a boy. If they were dressing in a specific way that used to trigger me, make me feel insecure. I was in a really dark place. Long story short, I went to see a shaman. As soon as he put his hands on my head, I would literally just go somewhere else, and I was always going back to...
Thanks so much for coming on, James.
Thanks for having me.
Feels weird actually being without the headphones. I know we recorded with headphones, but saying that now, I never held out to on my head.
I've seen the videos, yeah. I was wondering where I was actually going to be getting myself.
Yeah. So you are I think I'm going to pronounce this wrong, shaman who specialises in healing and trauma.
Yes.
So would you like to explain that a little bit more? Because I feel like I don't really understand that very well as well.
So all you're going to need for this is just an open mind.
Yeah.
So a shaman, a shamanic healer, or people say shaman, shaman. There's all different types of shamans. There's South American, there's North American. There's actually shamans all over the world. There's also Celtic shamans. So essentially, even though I've been born as an Irishman in this life, I've had many previous lifetimes as a Native American shaman. And in those lives I would have worked as a healer. Now, how did I discover this is what's really more interesting, because up until 2022 I hadn't a clue that I had healing abilities. At the time I was qualified in past life regression therapy. I was also a life coach. Went to college for a year to become a psychotherapist. So I was on a journey to figure out what path I meant to go on. But through my own trauma and my own suffering, I was in a really dark place. I was very suicidal at this time. I went through a breakup that was really hard. And long story short, I went to see a shaman. And when I went to see him, I was actually very reluctant to go see him, because a friend of mine says, why don't you go see the shaman? He's doing amazing work. I never even heard what a shaman was up to that point.
Yeah.
And I was like, tell me a little bit about it. And she was telling me, and I was like, I actually said, he sounds like he's full of shit. And she says, well, you can't even eat the dinner at me. You're like, what have you got to lose? Sitting there, like, suicidal, essentially. Like, what are you going to do? So reluctantly, I actually went to see him. And in that session, we had a conversation. He done a healing on me. And after the healing is when, like, during the healing, I remember, like, feeling like I was floating around the room. I was levitating. I could feel this energy moving through my body.
And what was the healing like? Was it meditation or?
So in a healing, essentially what happened is that you lay down on your back, eyes closed, hands down by your sides, and with every healing you would actually have the client set an intention for the healing. So for that one, I essentially just needed to be grounded, because I was all over the place. I was up in my mind. Energetically, I was fairly imbalanced. I was fairly low. As I said, I was suicidal. And I wasn't suicidal to the point where I was going to do something, but I had suicidal ideations and thoughts. But when he done a healing on me, essentially what he did was cleansed all my chakras, harmonized them, centered them, cleared all my meridian lines. Everyone has this.
And what are these? What are they?
These are just functions that we have going through the physical and energy bodies. But within we also have what's referred to as a grounding cord. Now, you can't physically see this, but we have one spiritually speaking. And he essentially replaced all of those things in the healing and pumped in pure positive energy into my physical energy and energy bodies. When he did this, I remember 2 days later feeling like a completely different human being. I couldn't have a negative thought. I just felt so grounded in myself. And I remember just thinking to myself, I don't know, how did he do what he did? Became extremely curious with it, and met up with him then, and I was asking him what is a shaman, and he was explaining to me. But essentially when I was actually working with him through the process of a year, he would have done many healings on myself, helped me resolve the traumas that I would have experienced. But anytime he's doing a healing on me, I'd go on what's referred to as a journey, where as soon as he puts his hands on my head, I would literally just go somewhere else, and I was always going back to Native American times where I was a Native American man, and I'd see myself in the mirror, and I'd be like glitches of different lifetimes where I'd be young, I'd be old. I'd see my hands on people in different tribes. I'd see myself having families there. So I've gone back to all these different lifetimes. But he knew fairly early on that I was also a healer, but he couldn't tell me because I had to go through my own healing process. And if you tell somebody some information a little bit too early, it can almost like they may become too focused on that instead of going through their own healing journey. So after about 6 months, he says to me, "Do you know you're a shaman like me?" I was like, "No." And because I actually seen him, I was almost like a godlike figure because like we began working together. Then I was coaching clients, he was doing the healings, and I'm kind of going off what the original question was, but clients' lives were changing. Like I'd be like talking to them online how they're getting on, and I'd see the changes every single week with them, and I was like, and like this is therapy. Like I was like, you know, I'm familiar with like this talk therapy, there's all these other modalities, but I was like, this is literally changing these people's lives, and they've done decades. Some people have talk therapy and other therapies, and nothing's changed for them. And so essentially, he says like you have shamanic abilities, you have gifts, like just like myself. But it took me a really long time to own this. But essentially, even though I've been born as a man from Ballyferma and I'm Irish, when I do my work, I essentially channel into and go into a trance-like state, and I tune into the spiritual guides that I work with. So when I put my hands on people, I literally see myself as a Native American man in the room, and I usually see the Native Americans in the room around me, around the person's body, and we're essentially working on the person. And I know it sounds nuts, but we're clearing the meridian lines, replacing the grounding cords, harmonizing all of the chakras. But more importantly, we're finding where the trauma is for whatever the event was that the person went through. So in a session, just say someone went through bullying as a kid, and the session would be around, you know, asking them questions about that. And essentially what they're doing is they're just recalling the event. And when they're recalling and talking about it, you're organically opening up what's referred to as an energy body, and everyone has an astral body. And when you open up these different dimensions within the self, the energy starts to present itself. So when a person lays down, then I put my hands on their head and I'm able to journey, even though I'm standing where I am. Like some clients have even said, like even though I'm sometimes at their feet, they'll still feel a set of hands on their head. But sometimes they can actually feel the people in the room who was also working with me, working on them. And even sometimes when I sit down, they'll still, like they will sit up, like when I tell them they come around, like they thought I was still there with my hands on their head, even though I'm sitting physically away from them. And this is the same experience for clients online. I've got clients in Australia and Dubai, and they would literally feel like someone's physical presence.
So you'll do that online, like say over Zoom and stuff?
Yeah, everywhere. All over the world. Like I work with clients all over the world, and it's just as effective as it is in person. But a shaman essentially is somebody who can journey into the spiritual dimensions and the physical dimension and get information. So when I'm working with clients, essentially what I would do is I'd call in my spirit guides, the team that I work with, to work through me and to give me the information I need for this client. So when I'm sitting there and a person's telling me about their story, like I'm also getting information from my guides to share with the client or to ask specific questions. So essentially that's kind of what a shaman is to that level.
And when you were talking about like the different things that were kind of going through your head and what you were seeing, the journey you called it, like obviously that's different for every single person. Not everyone sees like what you saying.
Yeah.
So yeah.
As in when I was actually having healing or when I'm doing them?
Like when you were getting the healing, like.
So
it's completely different.
Yeah, everybody is obviously extremely unique. But I have had clients, they wouldn't necessarily go to the same places. But like when I've seen it a lot, and especially in 2023 when I really began working on my own, like to be a client laying there, I'd be an Irish guy. But as soon as I trance in, I put my hands on his head and I go into a deep state, he'd be a Native American man laying there. And I was like, he's a healer. He has shamanic abilities. And there's other times where I'd see somebody and like I've worked on clients in the past.
See what they're seeing.
So it's really interesting though, because some clients can see what I can see, or I'm seeing what they're seeing. And I actually got to a point with a client where he thought I was winding him up. Because he would say, so essentially some clients journey as well, and I'd say afterwards, like, what came up for you? And then they'd say, I went here and I was in this different space and place with loads of animals and water. And I'd say, I'd seen that as well. And then your mum was like, you see everything that I see. So a week later he goes, right, what did you see first? And I'll tell you what I seen. And I was like, this is what I seen. He goes, that's exactly what I seen. So that only happened really with one client where we're on par seeing the same things every week. So a lot of the time when I'm doing the healings, I will basically be seeing this dark energy, which is the suppressed emotions from the trauma that the person has experienced. They'll be off somewhere walking along a rainbow in a fields, like through a forest with some sort of animal, like having a beautiful experience. While I'm literally seeing what they went through as children, and I'm finding where that energy is and removing it from them. So sometimes, for some clients though, depending on where they're at in their own development, it may show them what the energy looks like, because it's a very dark, dense energy, the trauma. But for most people, they just have a nice experience.
Yeah, so a bit like a fortune teller as well. And also, that are you able to tell them what happened?
But it would, sometimes you can share with them what you've seen, sometimes you can't. Sometimes you can see into the person's future, but you can't tell them that stuff.
Oh, really? Can you?
Yeah.
Oh, God, that's...
But if you told them, it's information that you're getting about their path, but you're not meant to share it with them.
Yeah.
But
they've really gone a different path altogether then.
It's so basically...
I get really, not obsessive over...
They could become very concentrated on it. But at the same time, if that person is meant to go through an experience that's going to teach them and help them to grow, and you're going to give them an insight into their future, you're going to kind of rob them of the experience. Yeah, so you're not meant to tell.
Bad one or...
Yeah, I've seen stuff like that where I've seen a client in a healing, I can't really go into it, but it wasn't good. But a week later, he seen something very similar. And then I was able to share it, I seen that the week before, and it was just got to do with this person's life choices. And it was a possibility that if the person keeps moving along their path, making the exact same choices they're making, then this is a possible outcome. So the reason he's both getting this information is so this person can make a different choice and create a new path for themselves.
Yeah, so, and then with the sessions and stuff like that, how many sessions would someone need to completely heal? Did you mention, I think you said only one for you, was it?
No.
After the first one, you were having no negative thoughts and stuff.
That was after one healing. So essentially that can last. So essentially when you have a healing, you go into what's referred to as a 7-day process. And within that 7 days, it can be very emotional. So some clients will, for the first 3 or 4 days, feel like shit. They'll feel emotionally exhausted. They'll have headaches, especially for people who have a lot of suppressed emotions, people who have never felt their emotions. When you start removing trauma, you're almost removing a layer of energy. And then other energies that have been buried underneath that level will start to surface themselves. And these are usually things that this person has squashed and never want to feel. So when that happens, some clients can report back feeling very emotional, very sad, feeling angry. This is all good. For me, I had an amazing mindset at the time. I was up there really personally developing myself, reading a lot of books, listening to a lot of podcasts. So, and I was also studying spirituality, so I was in a really nice space. But if I had just done one, that wouldn't have... All he done was a grounding. We had to do individual sessions on everything that I went through my life as a kid, through my teenage years, my adult life. So on average, most people see me probably for an average of 10 sessions. I've had clients with me for over 20. It really depends on what a person's experiences have been.
Yeah. And you mentioned so for you to go to the shaman yourself, you mentioned you had a very traumatic experience growing up and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So what was your life growing up like?
It was interesting because I was the youngest of 4 children, 3 older sisters, the youngest child. My father, my mum, both physically present. My mum, we were also really broke. My dad never worked. And my mum worked as a cleaner for 6 days a week. I actually remember her sharing with me. I couldn't believe it. She used to get £70 a week. And she used to scrub this pub on her own. I remember I used to go in with her on Saturday mornings and try and help her. But in the house, it was very toxic. My father wasn't emotionally present, very physically violent to us all. My mum was as well, but I never really thought much of it from a lot of people have this idea, and I do have to say this to clients, that even if with the first day a parent slaps you or hits you, it changes the dynamic of the relationship forever. Because up until that point, the parent is a source of love, nothing but love and safety. And then the day that they hit you, it's changed the relationship because they're now also a source of pain for you. And you can become very conscious of yourself and aware of the parent then, wondering will they ever do that again. But a lot of the time when we're 5, 6, we can realise, I've done something, parent didn't like it, I've got a slap for it. But if you're 2 years of age, 3 years of age, 4 years of age, you don't really have those conscious faculties developed to even understand why you're being hit. Especially for the child, they just forget what they just done and they may do it again and be hit again. But in my home, it was crazy. And my father at that time he had his own mental health issues. He was a gambler, he was an alcoholic, and never had a job, was extremely abusive to my sisters, extremely abusive to me, wasn't emotionally available, no love, never said those words, I love you. There was birthdays were never celebrated, Christmases, I can never ever remember my mum and dad ever being present. It was just, it was a very grim household, but a lot of physical violence. Like, he would have projected a lot of his anger and his wounds onto me. I wouldn't have known this at the time, but he would have hit me to the point where I would have actually urinated myself with fear as a kid. And like, nobody would have really done anything. You kind of just had to like look after yourself. We all lived, yeah, but we all lived very separately. No one ever sat at a table together, had dinner. No one ever spoke. House was very, like, everyone just kind of went their separate ways. It was like a house of individuals rather than a family. Yeah. But with my so up until that point, it was already toxic. My dad being how he was, my mum being how she was, and she's a beautiful soul. But my two sisters then in the 90s became addicted to heroin through their own traumas. And all addictions is literally just a crutch, a tool for the person to be able to cope with what they're carrying. I didn't obviously notice at the time, but there would have been times where like the violence got even worse then, because here you had my dad, who's obviously like a ball of rage sitting there, and then you have my two sisters who were addicted to heroin, and there would have been a lot of violence around that. But I actually remember even times like in my house, like going to get into bed and pulling up a duvet and finding a needle, that a used needle, like in the bed, and it was just normal. I just thought it was a normal thing because I was so used to chaos, and I almost normalized madness. Well, it was yeah, there would have been times as well when I was very small. It could have been about 8 or 9 or 10. Like, my mum used to like sneak out at night trying to look for my sisters. She used to walk around the streets of Ballyfermot
looking for them.
Yeah, she wouldn't know where they were, obviously, and I think they were in their late teens at that stage. And I used to follow her, but she never knew I was behind her. I used to always she'd look behind her and I'd be in the garden hiding. And to my innocence, I'd be like, thinking I'm trying to keep her safe. But then you'd have
how old were you at the time?
Probably 8 or 9. Yeah, I was very young. But then you'd have people come to the door. I don't like using this expression. Like, see, when people, it's not the right title, but I'm not even going to say it. People who are also addicted to drugs and alcoholism, looking for my sisters, or if they owed money out, coming to me, mum and dad for it. So there was always there was just none but fear, none but violence, no love.
Yeah, that's crazy. And like, what way do you think, obviously, all of that would have, as you said, traumatized you and affected you as an adult? Like, and what from all that experience, like, what did you find, like say that the way you deal with things, or I think you mentioned that it made you like with relationships and stuff. Was it that you couldn't hold down the relationship growing up? Was it?
Yeah,
friends and stuff.
So actually, when my first girlfriend was 16, I was with her for 7 years. We had my daughter Katie when I was 19. So 19, being a father, being very traumatized, living together, literally trying to be a man, but still emotionally trapped as a boy. And it was very difficult because our relationship ended. And then I ended up getting into a string of relationships. They were all like a year long. But there was one common denominator in every one of them. I was sabotaging myself. These were all really nice women that I was meeting. But they all had their own wounds. They were, when I reflected on it after doing a lot of healing, like, they were looking for somebody to be emotionally available for them. And I remember thinking they were just emotional hard work. But you always align with somebody who has the opposite wounds. I could not be emotionally available for anybody because I couldn't even give that to myself, because I never got it from my parents. And when your parents aren't emotionally available for you and the environment is quite traumatic, you literally disconnect from yourself to just survive the environment. And so I would have met these women, would have been amazing crack in the beginning. And next thing you know, I'd become abusive. I'd get jealous. I'd be paranoid. I'd be going through phones. I'd be very insecure. I'd be a bad manipulator. Like, if they were dressing in a specific way, that used to trigger me, make me feel insecure. And I used to always, I was just literally like a wrecking ball in those relationships. I was never physical, but I was very emotionally and mentally abusive to women. And I didn't see anything wrong with this, because this is what I witnessed in my own home. Like, this is how the relationship was with my mum and dad. And that's the first relationship a child ever has to go off, is the relationship that the parents have. That's it. That doesn't set you up for life, but it gave me an idea of what a relationship should look like. So when I'm talking to a woman at that time and I'm talking to her like shit, and she has a problem with it, I'm like, but you're just too sensitive. Because my mum just stuck around, and when my dad spoke to her like that, she would have gave him a little bit of abuse back, but she just took it. And I would have witnessed that as a kid. And therefore my programming is, that's fine. It's okay to talk to women like this. But
So what was the kind of point where you were like, right, I need to get help with this, or that's not okay? Like,
So in 2000, I think it was 2017, I was with another girl, and it was always amazing because in the beginning of the relationships, I'd always, fall real heavy deep for these girls and madly in love. So
we won't say it.
oh, stop! But it always lasted about 6 months, and then I would go back to factory sense, abusive, cheating on them, not wanting to be around them, not
I
wanting.
feel like those. Sorry, so I feel like that's what I was gonna say. Normally, when a fella is like that, they get paranoid. It's close like when they're cheating on you.
Yeah, it can be.
Yeah, like I've been in previous relationships now, and I've gotten cheated on twice. And I'm after learning as well now. That's from obviously my trauma growing up, and certain things you probably know about that. About that.
But your trauma?
No, I mean like as in like what way that could, because I never knew this until I started getting counselling. And the counsellor said that could be from the people that I'd be going for is from what I've kind of dealt with growing up. But I'm like, where was I going with this now?
You asking me?
Yeah.
So you're basically saying,
oh yeah, that basically like that most of the time, like if someone is like looking at your phone, accusing you of stuff, or it's always when they're kind of doing it on you. That's what I kind of noticed myself.
Now it is like that is a massive part of it as well, that the person is like what they're doing is what they also fear being done on them. So you try, and if I'm trying to reflect on it, like even though I knew this person wasn't, and I knew who I was, I always like, I know lads out there that would be very like narcissistical, that they wouldn't give two shits. Where I always felt so sorry for the person and felt very compassionate. Like I was extremely wounded. And I found this out in the last couple of years when I started working on myself. I used to actually think I was a narcissist because all the women that I hurt. And again, but there's actually 3 types of people in the world. There's the narcissist, there's a covert narcissist, and then there's a wounded empath.
Could you explain these now?
The covert narcissist is what you would refer to as like an assassin of narcissists. You would almost mistake them for being an empath, but they're not. It's so hard to identify in the person whether they're a narcissist or not, because they give off all the traits of an empath, but they're really a narcissist. So a narcissist is somebody who will never take blame for any situations. They will never see themselves as the problem. They will always just project rather than take any accountability. Where an empath is somebody obviously who feels a lot of pain, feels a lot of suffering, will take accountability. But for me, I think it was within the 4th 1-year relationship, I remember thinking, like, here I am again, not happy, being abusive. Like, what's going on with me? Like, it has to be me, because I knew it wasn't this girl. She was such an amazing person and gorgeous person, would have gave me everything, and it still wasn't enough. But the reason it wasn't enough was because I didn't feel like I deserved it. So when you don't feel like you deserve love because of your relationship with your parents, you'll sabotage relationships that could potentially be beautiful. And that's what healing does for us. It offers us the ability to heal the wound so we can actually receive love, because we can give ourselves love. But essentially in 2017-18 is when it was a turning point. I entered into a new relationship, which is my current relationship, and the two of us were going through the spiritual awakening at the same time. Familiar with spiritual awakenings?
I don't know, could you explain it more in detail?
So they're hard to explain essentially, but essentially what a spiritual awakening is
when you realise something.
You start questioning your reality. You start looking around. I remember just looking at that time I was actually really big into the gym. I'm still big into the gym, but I had my whole ego and identity was associated with my physical body. I was had a really attractive looking body that I built. Now my whole team was taking selfies in my boxer shorts, top off, putting up positive quotes that I wasn't even living by, and that's who I
prove to somebody else.
Trying to and the more women at that time, even when I was single, that would comment on it, and like, it wouldn't make me feel any better. It'd make me feel worse, because I realised here's all these women that kept saying, "Oh my God, you're this and that," and blah blah blah, whatever. And I feel even more empty inside. I'll get into that again, but essentially a spiritual awakening was, I was actually in my kitchen one day about to take a selfie. I was at to get my hair cut. The light was shining in. My teeth looked really white. It looked really good. And I remember just having this moment going, what am I doing? Why am I taking a selfie? Like, who am I taking this for? Like, and then I just put the phone away, and I don't think I've taken a selfie since and posted it. That was like 2018. I was like, what am I doing? So I essentially then started looking at everything in my life, started looking at my beliefs, how I was carrying on. All of a sudden, I want to meditate, I want to journal, I want to be in nature. So essentially, spiritually awakening is when the soul within you is almost like it's waking up the physical personality. And it gets extremely turbulent because you can't be around people that you're used to being around. You like to isolate yourself. It's a very lonely process and dark process. But essentially I was going through that with my current partner, and even with her, like, you know, the same girl that I found extremely attractive, I was now threatened by as soon as I got feelings for her. You know, like I met her in the gym, she was gorgeous, still is, beautiful body, and like that would have really initially attracted me to her. And I remember once I had feelings for her, then I was like, are you going to wear those? You're going to put a top over that and all? My insecurities again coming up, and then I realised like I'm so insecure, and I really made the first year of the relationship very hard for her, you know, because of my jealousy, my insecurities, and essentially I ended up going to therapy, and speaking about that, about 20 therapy sessions, and I was going to study to be a therapist myself, but everything changed for me essentially when I worked with a shaman. That's when everything, like, I'm no longer insecure. But it's interesting how I noticed it in 2021. Out of 2022, after doing all the work with the shaman, there was no insecurities. Like, I was so solid within myself. But 2017 is when I realised I need to sort myself out.
And do you feel like do you still work with shaman yourself now, or can you just do would you still do kind of like, say, the sessions on your own, or like? So
one thing I teach people is that when you've done a certain level of healing, like, you can't really be fully healed in this life. You can do a massive amount of healing though. Your life's broken up into all these different categories. If you can create balance within the different areas of your life that you invest time into, then you won't become imbalanced within yourself. Now, I've got 2 young kids as well. I've got a 4-year-old and a 16-month-old. So I can have a lot of sleep deprivation. Me and my partner sometimes can be at each other because of both of us being sleep deprived. But the main thing is though, like, we be still very balanced, beautiful communication within us. But I wouldn't find myself being triggered anymore. Like, there's nothing that would happen in my life since I've ever done all this work that I've realised, like, I need to go see somebody. Sometimes, depends on it again, on sleep deprivation. In the beginning, I would probably go see this lady that she's a healer, and you'd go to her for a grounding. The last time I was with her was like September. But essentially, if I found like I'm dysregulated, I don't feel great, I feel my energy body's very low, I'd go out to a space where I work, and I would just call in the guys that I work with, and I'd tell them to work on me. So I would just lay there, and I would just allow them to do what they need to do.
Yeah, and do you feel like now, like, so all your trauma, like, and stuff, like, is well, how do I say it? Not fixed, but like
resolved.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, from all the healing and stuff.
Absolutely, it is.
Yeah.
I'll never forget the first day I noticed it. Do you want to know? Do you want to hear about it?
Yeah.
So my partner was selling her car in 2022, and at that point, like, we actually broke up in 2021, and this is what triggered me going through my suicidal time. I was in a really bad space. I knew the breakup has nothing to do with her. I was studying trauma at this stage. I realised that I was triggered. All the emotional wounds from childhood, all the rejection and abandonment had came back up. She represented safety and security, and I didn't have any of that when she didn't want me anymore. So essentially we got back together 2022. She was actually selling our car one day, and I was at the back garden with my son Elijah. She's like, your man's coming, do you want to come out? I was like, no. Are you all right on your own? She's like, yeah. I was like, all right, work away and good luck. I just sat there having a coffee, and I remember thinking, if this was a couple of years ago, or even though a couple of years ago, 6 months ago, I probably would have been at the top window looking at your man, see what he looks like, if he's better looking than me, or just being really insecure about it. Yeah, like just checking her out and looking at her body language and all, getting me black bags ready in the house. Not that wouldn't have really, but not having those thoughts like she's gonna just leave me for somebody else. And that's what insecurities does, they bury us within ourselves. But I remember just thinking, like, there's nothing, and I just had this realization, like, I don't care. I just feel so safe within my body. And then there was more moments where other situations that in the past would have really triggered me, like just a good looking guy, like, standing in the same area where I would have been. Like, a lot of people do this if they're insecure. They're looking at their partner to see, are they looking at that person? I would have really done that, and if I believe the person was, the stomach would have went into a somersault, would have been triggered, would have been like, you know what I mean? And just a real, like, off attitude, where I just realised that I don't care. It's not that I don't care about her, I do, but I don't care. Like, I'm enough now for myself. So
when you work with other people, and obviously these were your insecurities growing up from trauma that you experienced, what would other, like, so obviously they'd be your clients, what would their kind of, what would they be acting now growing up from experiencing trauma?
Well, wait, what?
Like, what could be other things? Like, say, obviously for you, it was like, say, cheating and not being able to like hold down a relationship, or like, what would, say, for your clients, what would they've experienced and what are they like as adults from their trauma? Like, is there anything else?
So what? Hold on. So what experience has my clients been through that's been traumatic, and as a result of their trauma, what way would they have been?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So just, you could have people who like are addicted, have OCD,
Yeah.
OCD, who have, I don't believe there's an addictive personality, but have been addicted to substances. It could be to pornography, it could be to shopping, whatever, any sort of addiction. I'm trying to think now. No one's ever really asked me that. What sort of traumas have your clients been through? Well, obviously the range of clients, the amount of stuff my clients have been through would range from like every sort of abuse you could ever think of. The worst one really being sexual abuse, like severe sexual abuse. That's usually the worst one that you can come across, the heaviest energies. Well, as a result of that, a lot of people use certain coping mechanisms, certain strategies to try and just mask what's really going on for them. A lot of people actually can become mega entrepreneurs. They're extremely successful in their lives, and they're doing it out of an energy.
Alcoholics.
Yeah, but like the workaholic is, we usually celebrate a workaholic. He works a lot, like, and we think it's a good thing, but he's no different to the heroin addict. They're both escaping from something. If you take away the workaholic's tools and the heroin addict's drugs, you'll expose them. You'll really see the real person that's there. So so a lot of clients will obviously go through their own traumas, but through any trauma, there's an adaptation. There's always some mechanism that we create. For mine, it was, I just genuinely fell into pure victim mode. Went through a lot of shitty jobs, couldn't hold down relationships, was extremely abusive, wasn't a good father. Other clients, again, OCD, addictions, very similar, insecurities. It's actually very similar to what I see. Like, usually people's adaptations is can't hold down relationships, suicidal with themselves, bad relationship with their kids, careers that they hate. There's usually a common thread that is created as a result of the trauma.
Yeah, the reason why I kind of asked that is because I'm like, there's probably other people listening there not realising that like something that they're going through could be from, to say, a shaman could heal, or like something that could be caused from them growing up from traumatic experiences.
Mm.
And how, that's the one thing that kind of scares me. Like, say, like, when you're, obviously you have kids now, so say everything you do with them, you probably watch, like, you're like, if you say something and you're like, oh, probably shouldn't have said that. Like,
It's interesting because, are you familiar with soul contracts?
what, sorry?
Soul contracts.
No, so what's that?
So essentially, I studied this thing in Colorado called Between Lives Regression Therapy, and in that you get to find out why you chose to come here on earth. Most people believe that if you're gone by the Catholic Church, that you came out of your mother's womb, which you did, but there's no life before this, and there's no life after this. Depending on how you live this life, you either go to heaven or hell. That's it. And where Between Lives Regression Therapy proves that there is a spiritual dimension, there is before life, and there's afterlife. So when I was practicing this on clients in the past, I remember, like, you essentially in that session, you would guide a client, I'm going somewhere with this, you would guide a client back to the spiritual dimension, but these clients would never have known each other, and they were all going back to the exact same places, saying the exact same things that they seen, and all of it matched up. So nobody can be making this stuff up, essentially. It can't be fabricated. But essentially, in a Between Lives Regression Therapy session, you get to find out why you chose to have this life. So I got to find out why I chose to be James. I got to find out why I chose my father. On a soul level, it's all perfectly chosen. Like, we choose to come to earth, we choose our identities, we choose the family dynamic, but we also choose our kids. So no two children get the same parents. So my daughter got a very different father to Elijah, and Elijah got a very different father to Rumi, which is the youngest child. Because by the time Rumi came along, I was after doing an immense more healing on myself than when Elijah came along. So Elijah wouldn't have experienced anywhere near as much trauma as Katie. She would have went through the most trauma as a result of how I would have been with her. But it's interesting because you can consciously parent, which is what we try to do to the best of our abilities. You can do gentle parenting, which is extremely difficult. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
Gentle parenting is when you are
trying to, like, it's like when a child does something and you don't punish a child, you get down the child's level and you're like, no, Elijah, I know when you get angry, you shouldn't do this and blah, blah, blah. And that doesn't always happen. Sometimes it depending on, again, it can be chaotic with the two kids, can be a lot of noise. Sometimes me and my partner can find ourselves that we actually need to like leave the room and just get a little bit of space because it's so chaotic. But you can't always get it right. But the main thing is for parents that if you can't get it right, is to remedy the situation. Like, and if you shout at your child I would never hit the kids, but just say you raised your voice, that would be as far as I'd go. To go back and say to them, I'm sorry, I'm sorry for shouting at you. And even Elijah now, if he shouts or screams, like he comes back in himself and he's like, I'm sorry, Mum, for shouting at you. And that's just having really good communication. That's essentially, that's like trying gentle parenting. Gentle parenting is a long-term thing. Like if you're teaching the child that it's okay to feel certain feelings, but it's not okay to hit us because you're angry, but it's okay to feel these feelings, and it's helping the child validate them. Where the way I would have been raised is that if you expressed any sort of anger, you got the head punched off you. Now, in the short term, you won't do it again because you realise the effects that had on me. Like, I don't want to be hit like that again, so you suppress yourself. But in the long term, then you bottle all this emotion up, and then you project it onto your partners or your children.
Yeah, I feel like now it's more people are realising that the way all these things were back in the day, like it was normal to get hit.
Yeah.
It was normal to get hit in school, it was normal to get hit like at home if you've done something bold. Where now I feel like it's more people are realising that literally even saying certain words can affect them.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's mad. That's what I feel like. If like I just want to make sure I'm completely healed, I'm not like maybe putting some of my trauma onto my kids. And then I feel like with our parents, like obviously the way they were with us is the way they were treated as grown up from their parents.
Of course.
So it all literally falls back, doesn't it?
That's why it's called multi-generational trauma. It comes through the generations. I think my mum's family was like of 11. I think my dad's could have been the same or bigger. But there was no emotional availability. Like those parents were not loving parents. My grandparents most certainly weren't. And then you have these two wounded children grown into adults and having families, but they're extremely wounded. They have no emotional love from their parents. A lot of the time they actually had to parent their own siblings. They never had a life of their own. So they have reservoirs and wells of suppressed emotions and anger. And then when you're a kid and you're just being your authentic self, you're just expressing yourself plain. And if they don't like that, they'll project all of this pain and suffering onto you and call it normal because that's what they used to do. I remember having one client that came in and was saying like how they were hitting the kid as if it was the 80s. I remember it was like, what else could you do that won't really harm the relationship? I was like, your child gets a message like that this relationship is very painful as well as possibly secure.
They don't have would you have a relationship with your parents now, or they're both still alive?
Well, yeah, both still alive.
Yeah, would you have a relationship with anyone in your family actually? Like, would you?
I don't have an active relationship. Like, I'd see my mum the most, but I don't have a problem with anybody. I just don't have an active relationship. I don't contact anybody. I'm literally just on my own journey. And this is one of the things that my clients report back to me. Every person who's came through my process has also said that I can't be around my family right now. Because your family are the people that you grew up with. They're the ones who really inflicted the most wounds and the pain on you. And they're usually trigger points. When you go through a healing process, you start for the first time going in on yourself. You're starting to just try and figure out who you are without your pain and beyond your pain. And sometimes you need to create boundaries with family. So it's not that I don't have a relationship with them. I don't really be in that much contact unless it's my mum.
And would you just find that hard now? Like,
no,
as an adult, no.
Like, it was interesting. It was my mum's birthday the other day. It was my father's birthday yesterday. I was down the other day. And I remember looking at my dad. Like, he's 75, very vulnerable looking. He's not the man that he used to be. And I was going, as we were leaving, I put my hand, and it's the first time I've ever actually done this, I put my hand on the back of his neck, on his head. And I just kind of held it, and I actually kind of just rubbed his hair, like, and just said goodbye to him. And I just felt in that moment a real connection with him, where there was points in my life where I actually wanted to murder the man, where now I'd be just at peace with him. But I would be like that with both parents, just at peace with them.
Yeah. And I'd say, yeah, that's what. So I'd say, like, after a couple of generations now, I feel like everyone would be much happier.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because everyone's realising this now.
Well, like, some people come in to me and say, you know, I was like, "Hey, getting on?" And just say it's their first session, and I'd ask them if you have kids. They said, that's one of the main reasons I'm here. I don't want to traumatize my kids. I'll say, how old are they? Because like 15. I'm like, that's gone. Like, you missed the opportunity. You've got like the first
50 when they say they're 15, like.
Oh, if they're over 7, forget it. If you haven't done work on yourself, the first 7 years of a child's life is crucial. Especially even when the child is in the womb. It's like the child feels everything the mother feels. If mum's stressed, depressed, anxious,
Yeah,
if she doesn't have support.
Listening to a podcast and they were talking about that.
Yeah, it's so
Feel all that.
oh, it's crazy. Like, I've done healings on people where I've done a healing on them. Just say it's like the mother wound, healing the trauma with mum, and it brought me back to when the child was in the womb, and I could see it in the womb, and I'm working on it, and then it would be like a newborn baby in front of me, even though it's a woman laying there or a man. But sometimes it brings me back that far, and when I'm journeying, that this is how far this wound goes back, and they're showing it to me because it needs to be healed. But yeah, if you don't get the first 7 years, like, you will be trying to repair the relationship for decades. But usually, especially the first 3, because that's when our attachment dynamics are formed. Like, they're the most precious years. A lot of clients come into me and they'll say, like, mum and dad broke up when I was 1, but that wouldn't have bothered me. And it's like, oh, no, that would have bothered you. When 2 people break up, there's usually a big period of time where they're unhappy. And as a very small child, when that child's brain is developing, the personality is developing, everything is developing at such a fast pace, because we develop as children in response to the environment. If that environment is toxic, that's going to affect the child's development. So I always say, like, a lot of children, a lot of people who have those sort of wounds when mum and dad broke up when they were very young, have a lot of rejection and abandonment wounds. And I always say to them, like, how are you in your relationships? I'd ask them certain questions, and you could easily identify that they've rejection wounds from their childhood that they can't even remember.
Yeah, and how, so for, like, if anyone has any, like, traumatic experience, like, kind of resurfacing, like, say, with anger or anything like that, how can someone deal with that?
Punch someone's head in. With anger.
Or sadness, or like...
So with anger is interesting, because anger is a secondary emotion. Behind all anger is pain. So my way of dealing with anger back in the day would have been to punch through walls and wardrobes and try and pull presses off walls. Just pure rage would come out, and within a second, like, I'm in it. I used to think this was a good thing, that I had to go one second. I used to think it was amazing and people, again, my daughter would have been looking at me thinking probably, nut job, like, and I wouldn't have thought anything of it. What I seen, I thought was very normal. But essentially, if you are angry, it's to create distance and space between what it is you're angry with. If it's a person, get out of the vicinity, get away from them. Go for a walk if you can, get into nature, barefoot, go to the beach, go for a drive, whatever it is. If you're triggered, you need to create space between you and what's triggered you. Sadness is something that needs to be really felt. Sitting with your sadness. Sadness is a very dense, heavy emotion that you just need to really feel it. It's not necessarily going to heal it or release it, but it just needs your awareness. People
probably cover that, like, with focusing on things like constantly being in the gym or constantly walking, and
that's what I'm saying. Like, so when people, like some clients would be amazing entrepreneurs doing extremely well. Like, I've worked with CEOs of businesses that are doing financially amazing, and when I ask them, like, when they're sitting in front of me and they're crying, I'd say, how old do you feel right now? And they'd be like, I feel like I'm 3. And even though, like, this person is not 3 years of age, it's a grown man or woman. And it's really interesting because a lot of people, especially on Instagram, will look at entrepreneurs, look at people who are self-employed, who are doing mega numbers, doing amazing big followings. If you were to really and truly talk to that person how they feel about themselves, if you told the truth, they'd say, I'm really lost, I'm really sad. And some people have the awareness that what I've been through, like, it has made me character, and it's drove me to create what I've created. But usually they're very imbalanced in other areas. If there's a relationship, that usually goes to shit. If there's kids, they're left at the wayside because the person's so tunnel vision on being successful. Because if you're successful, you're somebody, you're recognized. And you create and make a lot of life decisions out of fear and out of the energy that I'm not enough as me, and I need to create some sort of persona to be recognized and seen. So that's another trait that most people go down. But you can see it all over Instagram, all over social media.
Yeah, but I went to somebody else out there.
I used to be an Instagram model. I wasn't really, but I thought I was, like
an influencer.
You'd get like 60 likes, and I'd be like, thinking I'm somebody. And if I put up a post and I really liked it, and somebody not enough likes, I take it down. and I'd post at another time just to get more engagement.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I used to be that bad with it, and a lot of people do this. But the more attention, like I've seen it with clients, like the more money they've received, the more empty they feel. And essentially what you're doing when you're very wounded like this and you're very successful in your business world is you're trying to achieve more, to feel more. You're trying to achieve some sort of outcome by using your external reality to try and feel something within yourself, but you can't. It's like when you have wounds, they're like holes. You can never fulfill them with anything. You have to heal them. That's why if money did equal happiness, money equals comfort and possibility and options, obviously. But if it did equal happiness, you wouldn't have people who are minted and depressed or anxious. But when you're broke and you're depressed, you think if I just had more money, I wouldn't be, but you would be more comfortable, but you'd still be depressed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, yeah. And so you said you do work with, like, what is it, womb healing on my friend?
Yeah, womb work.
Womb. Yeah.
A woman's womb.
Yeah, so how's that? How does that work?
It is interesting because I was doing it anyways in my one-to-one sessions. So when I'm working with clients, the very first session I would actually do with them, is what's called a sexual transference. So when you have sex with people, you transfer energies, and women, especially like men's semen, can actually stick to a woman's womb wall. And if the energy of his semen is, obviously it will have trauma. If she's in trauma, he's going to be in trauma. If it's a very negative dark energy, it can actually cause physical illnesses for a woman. So the very first session I would do a sexual transference, which is clearing anyone's energy she's ever been with in her life or his life. You're getting rid of all those energies, you're clearing them from the person, and then you're calling back all the energy they've gave to other people they've been with. So essentially then you just have the person's energy that you're working with. Then after that, then I would work on abusive relationships. I'm going to get to the women. After that, I'd work on abuse they've experienced in relationships. Then if there's grief, unresolved grief, losing people, animals, whatever it is, school bullying, childhood bullying, workplace bullying, stuff like this. And also, like, it depends. Like, I've done a womb session within the first healing because it's what I was told to do. Like, sometimes a person would come in and say, I want to work on this, and next thing you know, I get told, like, this is what you need to work on, and then I'd ask me questions about it, and then it would make it evident. But essentially, when a woman in this life goes through miscarriages, abortions, even traumatic birth experiences, not even only traumatic birth experiences that could go fairly smoothly, to the physical body, it may appear that it was a very smooth birth, it was very quick, but energetically you have had so many people even put their hands inside you. They're injecting you with certain medicines, which are energies, and they're literally putting their hands all over your physical body. In that space, you're extremely vulnerable. Energetically, you're actually wide open to everyone's energy in their room. So when I'm doing those healings, I will see all these other energies, and they're like multiple energies from different people, and you're essentially clearing them from the person's womb. But I've had people report to me, I've done womb workshops with women, where like women have reported afterwards, like having a heavy release afterwards, like a lot of bleeding, and this would be like a releasing of energies that was in that area. A lot of time when I'm doing those workshops or doing those healings, I don't physically put my hand on the womb area. Sometimes I may actually have my hand on their head, and they'll feel like a presence at the womb, and they'll feel like a release happening. But also when I'm doing specific healings, especially like miscarriages or abortions, I always explain to the woman that there's a spiritual reason for this. That you've probably never heard this, that a child who is being miscarried has agreed to that experience before ever being brought here within the womb. Like, you would have known this pre-birth, and I get into the spiritual reasons behind trauma and why we go through certain things. And I also get them to, if they want in those specific healings, if they want to call in the energies of the miscarried children or the children that didn't go full term through, say, abortion. And a lot of the time they'll feel an energy come into the room, they'll sense it, they'll see it in their own journey. And yeah, it's very powerful. I always see little orbs. Or sometimes the most amazing one was I seen this woman, I think it was a boy and a girl, and they were literally laying on her in the healing, but she could feel them. And she was very tuned in, and she was able to, I actually heard her out first, and I was like, just saying, like, that's what I seen the exact same thing you did. But they're very powerful healings. But the womb work is really interesting because there's the physical trauma from this life, which is the miscarriages, abortions, sexual abuse, and then you've got past life trauma and past life karma that the soul can also carry into this life for it to be healed. You familiar with this?
Yeah, like that sounds mad. Like,
I know.
how did you learn all this? Like,
Well, when I was studying regression therapy, I would have learned all about. I never learned anything about the womb and that work. I learned a bit of the womb work through the shaman I worked with. He was educating me on it. But then when I started doing my own healings, that's when I started really understanding what this energy looks like. Essentially, when I trance in, I would literally see a lot of the time a Native American female come into the room, and she'll be literally clearing the woman's womb. It's very rarely a male that does it. It's usually a female energy that is working. But I essentially studied regression therapy, and that taught me all about past lives, how the soul in other lifetimes. So a lot of people have this belief, if you believe in this stuff, that just say in this life, me and you were in a relationship and I murdered you, stabbed you to death or something. You would go, the two of us, just say then I pass whenever I pass. Essentially, I've created karma with you because I've done something to you and we have created this unresolved energy between us. You may have not forgiven me for obviously murdering you, and I have not forgiven myself for what I did. So basically, you create this contract. It's a karmic energy. And then when you want to reincarnate, you look at the karma that you have created with other people in other lifetimes or the most previous, and then you create a blueprint for the new life that you want to work through. So you're like, I actually have all this karma that I need to resolve. So essentially, you come back into these physical bodies, you switch roles. You could be my mother in the next life, and you balance the karma out by putting me through an experience that's very similar to the one that you went through. And if we don't forgive ourselves and resolve it, then you'll do it again. And you can go through many lifetimes with this same karmic energy. So,
and that was, you learned all that in the, what's it, regression?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's mad. It's like a cycle, isn't it?
It is. When I learned all about this, it made me actually very distant from the world, because I would, like, the soul, like, also has, that's why people say we're spiritual beings having a human experience. We're not really human, we're a spirit in the physical bodies. And what really made me understand this and accept it was when I was doing these sessions with people, they were reporting back the same things, even though they didn't know each other. So I was like, they can't be making this stuff up. They don't know each other, and they're telling me about the same people that they meet in the spiritual realm. They look the same, they're going to these different places, and yet they've never met each other, and I'm hearing all this information. But the woman who I studied with had done something like over 10,000 of these sessions with individuals. She wrote books on it. It's very interesting information. But where was I going with that?
I lost it as well. And like, so with the sessions again, like, what is it exactly that you're doing for, like, in the session for people to, like, be seeing all this? And
well, it's interesting because it's not like, probably the one it's not too important whether clients see stuff. I've got clients who don't see anything, they don't feel anything, and they come back every single week, but they'll feel shifts in their life. They'll feel it within themselves. They feel lighter. They feel more relaxed in their body. They feel their thoughts are slowed down. They're no longer as triggered. They're no longer as reactive. Like, one of the best examples I have is of a client. I'm trying to not give any identity here, obviously, but essentially, when I journey in and I find where this trauma is, so when you work, say, with a psychotherapist, a counsellor, you're working with the mind, you're having a conversation, and it's talk therapy, which means you're working with one dimension. Then you got the physical body, and a lot of people will do somatic work for that, which is to help release the energy from the physical. Then you have an energy body, you have an astral body. So you've got 4 different dimensions, and if you don't remove the trauma from all 4, there's going to be an energy left behind that's still going to be creating some sort of interference within this person's life. So that's why people, like some of my clients are therapists, and it's interesting because they know themselves inside out. They have an amazing awareness, but they're still in trauma, even though they work with people themselves. They have their own practice. But when in a session, essentially what you're doing is finding where this energy is and removing it. When I do it, essentially I journey in. I can see this big black ball of energy. That's how it presents itself to me, and I essentially remove it from the person. And then I put new energy in. The new energy is just basically pure potential energy. This energy usually looks like it's white, it's blue, it's purple, all these different colours. Some people don't feel this, some people do. But I remember this one girl, she had this boyfriend that she was with, and extremely abusive, very, very bad physical abuse. She used to report anytime she'd see him, she'd have a panic attack. And this was like a really long time after they broke up. No, flat out panic attack. Wouldn't be able to eat or anything like that. it would literally just shut down our whole system. So she'd go into basically freeze mode, literally just go into shock when she'd see him. And even as a grown man, he used to mock her on the street as he'd pass her and like make fun of her and so forth, even though they were like nearly in their 40s at this stage. And I remember we'd done a healing on her one day, and I was always curious to see what would happen when she bumps into him again. Like, how will she respond? Because I've seen the energy is being removed. And she was saying she was in our local shop and she didn't even realise it, but when she looked to her left, he was standing there looking at her, and she was looking at him probably as close as me and you were, and nothing happened. Like, she literally had no reaction within herself. Got what she needed, went home, was telling her partner about it. He's like, how are you fine? She's like, I don't know. She was telling me about it, and I was like, the energy was removed. So the energy is what's causing this emotional trigger. So when I worked with that shaman, he was removing all this dark energy from me. It's almost like he's pulling out these insecurities, all this this energy that would have been causing me to have mad intrusive thoughts. Like, that's what this energy does. It creates all these different interference patterns within us. But essentially, when you remove it, you're removing the trigger. You're removing this explosiveness from the person. So clients then report feeling balanced, very quiet within themselves, calm. But at the same time, resolving the trauma is only one aspect of the work. Like, I'm also a coach and a mentor, so you have to teach people how to recreate their new lives. So when you go through trauma, you've created a whole life for yourself out of this fake persona, out of the belief that you're not enough, you have no self-worth. A lot of the time you end up in jobs and careers believing that this is what you truly wanted for yourself. When you start healing and loving yourself, you start reflecting on everything that you've created in your life and realising, why am I still in this? It doesn't align with me anymore. So you have to help them navigate it. You have to help them create these changes. So I give a lot of suggestions and information. I get a lot of guidance from spirit to share with clients in certain situations. A lot of female clients that work with me end up going through divorces and breaking up their relationships.
They realise after they actually...
Just to realise that this person is extremely abusive and I can't be with them anymore.
I feel like a lot of women don't realise that they could be in an abusive relationship. They think it's normal, and
that's one of the main things that people...
Is she like an emotionally abusive one?
Yeah. They're the hardest to detect. Because what I'd say to somebody is, your relationship abusive? No, he doesn't hit me or anything. Alright, does he ever call you names? Like, what you mean? Like, and would he ever call you names? Would he ever say certain things to you? Would he be insecure, and would you be just kind of probing at them? Like, yeah, and they'd kind of say like that's okay, but that's what they went us when they were kids. But also, I make it this very like I say this a lot online, that if you're in a relationship that is abusive, like, there's this thing called attachment versus authenticity. Have you ever heard of it?
I kind of think I know what you're talking about. Like, as you said earlier on, basically, like, you're the type of person that you're going for is, or you're like what you've experienced traumatically, like.
Yeah.
That we're kind of bringing up again, kind of.
So as children, every child has a need to attach, which means it has a need for connection. Like, without connection, we can't survive. We really need our parents to see us, to love us, to validate us. But as children, we also have a need for authenticity. We need to be, like, children are as authentic as you can get. Like, when I'm looking at my 16-month-old, he's just himself. And I'm looking at Elijah, he's just himself. He can't be anything other than that. The only way he'll get an idea that what he's doing is wrong, or how he's thinking his feeling is wrong, is from his parents. If we're commenting on him or suppressing him or shutting him down, then he'll question his authenticity of how he's really feeling and thinking. And as children, because connection is more important than being authentic or real, they'll suppress their authenticity, they'll put it in the back burner, and they'll go full-blown just for connection because they want to be loved and validated from their parents. So in relationships, when a person has done this as a kid, they'll get into a relationship with somebody that's extremely abusive, but this person meets the illusion of connection. It meets the need for to be loved and to belong, and it gives them some sense of security, but it doesn't. It's toxic. But when you go through a healing process, and also when women and men are in those situations, there's a part of them that wants to live. And friends see it, like, why can't you leave your man? They say he's a bleeding gobshit, like, he does nothing for you and all, and so, some clients say this, like, he baits the head off you and all, and she still goes back to him, and they can't understand why their friend will do this. And it'll be because she has a need to be loved, and he right now meets it on some level for her. But when you go through a healing process, you stop choosing attachment and you start choosing authenticity. You literally, for the first time in your life, begin to connect to yourself, and you no longer really need that person. You're no longer as codependent on that person to meet your emotional needs. You never did anyway, but you end up meeting your own. So for the first time, they choose themselves over the relationship, and they usually go through divorces. breakups. And I say this to clients in the very first session: if they're in a relationship, is it a healthy relationship? And most of them say no. Some of them say yeah, and some of them actually are. Like, they're good relationships. Like, if your woman has done a lot of trauma, somehow she's met a man who has done a lot of trauma, but he's managing it really well. Like, again, he could be like a workaholic. That's what we applaud. But he has ways of dealing with it. You know, he's not an alcoholic. He's not abusive physically. He's very quiet. That's his coping way. So people would deem that he's very quiet. He's a very easy to be with. But essentially, yeah, a lot of women and men leave relationships if they're not good.
So for anyone listening who's like probably thinking, oh, am I in one of them relationships? What would be you said there's 3 different types, isn't it?
Of narcissists.
Yeah, and then obviously would that be kind of the same thing as abusive, like physically, mentally?
Well,
that would kind of go in with each other, wouldn't it?
yeah. So there's a reason you also meet. So with a wounded empath, they're usually somebody who will treat you like shit and say certain things, but be apologetic and mean it, and won't understand why they're doing it. Like, you know, there's a good person there. I remember one girl said it to me. She says, "You're fucking brilliant, but you're a nut job. Like, you need to sort yourself out." Like, and that left me. Do you know what I mean? She's like, you're a really nice person, but I don't know. You need to go to therapy. And but she was 100% right. Like, I was a kind person, but I was so wounded, I just didn't know how to control anger. Very insecure, whatever else. The narcissist, you'll never see them in therapy. I'll never meet a narcissist in my office ever, because they're not the problem. They'll always see everyone else.
The problem.
Yeah, they'll never take accountability. They'll gaslight people. They'll ghost them. They'll do all those different things that they do. And I don't look at narcissists as if they're bad people. A narcissist is a child that's extremely damaged. Very,
That's
very
what I was
wounded.
going to say. What makes a person a narcissist then?
Very wounded.
That's going into another question altogether.
Yeah, but it is. They're very, very wounded. So that's why, like, when people come in and, like, so just say it's a female, she comes in, she's complaining about, you know, I just can't stop meeting narcissists. Like, everybody that you meet as an adult is a teacher, especially in romantic relationships. They're always teaching you what you need to heal. And everyone's always holding up a mirror to each other. So when you meet somebody, they're abusive to you. Usually you align with somebody who triggers your wounds. And if you go back to the philosophy of me saying that you chose this path, you chose to be here, you chose specific relationships out of the karma that you need to resolve. And if you came in to spiritually evolve through that pain and suffering, if you meet somebody and it's happily ever after for the rest of your life, which would be great, you would never heal what you came in to experience. So the only way you know what to experience as an adult is for it to be triggered. And that's your childhood stuff. So a lot of people come in to me and they'll say, you know, this person says this, it triggers me, upsets me. And I always do an exercise with them. I get them into their body, tell them to close their eyes. I ask them where they feel it. And I ask them how old they feel. Always a single digit, sometimes a teenager. Usually I'm 6 years of age. What happened to you when you were 6? And sometimes they're able to say, like, my mum said this or my dad did this. And this partner is mirroring that wound that they need to heal. Essentially, nobody sees relationships like this. They don't see that this relationship is like trying to teach me something, but they essentially are. So don't forget, like, you know, when I always ask people this, what comes out of an orange when you squeeze it? It's not a trick question. What comes out of an apple when you squeeze it? Yeah. But what comes out of a human being when it's squeezed is what's inside.
Yeah.
So if you've got this pain and anger and sadness and you're being squeezed, and when you're pressured, that's what's inside you. That's what you need to heal. But a lot of people, if they have a lower awareness, will see the person as the problem. You're making me feel. They're making you feel what's already there. They're making you feel what you need to heal. But essentially, if you don't have a broader awareness, you'll see them as the problem. And what women and men do is they get rid of the person thinking, you're the fucking nuisance. Like, I can't be with you. But then they'll get somebody else, different body, different face, different name, and they'll be to some level or not. It's very similar to the person they just got rid of. And the cycle just keeps repeating until you heal your wounds.
Yeah, that's why that probably explains why I've been with a few people that have been cheating on me.
Yeah, like, so, I was going to say, do you want to go into it?
We'll leave it at that. Thanks so much for coming on, James.
You're very welcome.
Anyone is looking out to reach out to you, you'll probably see me at one of your
Workshops.
yeah. So if anyone's looking out to reach out to you, where can they find you?
So on Instagram, the page is called James Deegan Healing. Same for Facebook, and then my website is jamesdeeganhealing.com. I also have a course at the minute. It's called Trauma Stops With Me. It's a 9-module online course, And it's a course that you can do it in your own time. Essentially, Module 1 is teaching people how to identify their own wounds, how to essentially almost be almost like your own therapist. You'll be able to figure out exactly what you've been through and how that's shown up in your life. And the rest of the modules is like how to create boundaries, how to recognize what your coping mechanisms is, how to recognize how you're living life in fear and defensively, and essentially how to change all of that. It's full of exercises, and there's a nice roadmap in it. I also have a video for every module, and I do a voiceover for the whole course. Some people can't read, some people are dyslexic, some people don't like reading, so I decided to do a voiceover for the whole thing. But yeah, essentially at the minute, it's most of the engagement and the traffic that I would get would be through Instagram.
Yeah, unreal. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button, and follow us on Instagram at Demi's Nails and Beauty, or our podcast page, Unlocked Potential Podcast. See you next time.